Before the story begins, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. It helps the channel more than you know. And if you enjoy HFY stories where humanity proves the galaxy wrong, drop your favorite moment in the comments below. Now let's begin. The Galactic Academy of Zenith Prime shimmered beneath four suns, its towers carved from crystal alloys that bent the light into sharp, celestial beams. Students of 37 species drifted through the main concourse, their voices a rising tide of speculation. Word traveled faster than the tram networks on Zenith Prime. A human was arriving. An actual Homo sapiens. Most cadets had never seen one in person, and those who had described them as slow, delicate, painfully organic, barely above baseline. No one expected much. Jackson Reeves stepped off the shuttle without ceremony, his boots hitting the ground with a steady thud. His dark hair was cut short, and a duffel hung from his shoulder in a way that made him look more like a soldier than an exchange student. His eyes, a sharp gray, scanned the Academy Plaza not with fear, but with something closer to assessment, measuring escape routes, routes of approach, vantage points. The aliens observing him misread it as confusion. They often misread humans. A pair of Telari students paused mid-conversation. Their skin glowed faintly as one whispered, "Is that really one of them? I thought they were smaller." "Fragile things," the other murmured. "Soft bones. High mortality rates. Poor sensory range." Jackson walked past them without reacting. The comments weren't new. He'd heard worse from mercenaries who thought humans were good for little more than labor. Still, the academy was supposed to be different. Supposed to be. He entered the orientation hall, where a holographic banner shifted between languages, "Welcome new cadets." Inside, hundreds of students gathered in tiered seating arranged around a floating platform. The air carried the sharp tang of ozone from a recent energy demonstration. Some species smelled it more strongly than others, so a few students twitched irritably. Jackson found an empty seat near the middle. Several cadets immediately shifted away from him, leaving an awkward gap. He didn't mind the space, but he noticed everything. The furtive glances, the tightening of mandibles, the subtle flaring of gills from the aquatic-born. To them, humans were a curiosity at best, a liability at worst. Zenith Prime's entrance examinations favored telepathic acuity, exoskeletal resilience, and neural overclocking, fields where humans lagged behind. The instructor materialized on the central platform with a crackle of projection shielding. He was a Grelian, nearly 2 meters tall with plated armor for skin and eyes like polished steel. His voice rumbled through the hall. "Cadets, this term we welcome many new arrivals. Some come from long-established warrior cultures. Others," his gaze slid toward Jackson, lingering with an unmistakable sneer, "offer us opportunities to study biological diversity." Several students snickered. Jackson sat still. "Combat Ethics 101, the instructor continued, requires respect for all forms of life, including those lacking durability." The low laughter grew louder. Jackson kept his breathing even. He wasn't here to fight. Not yet. The orientation ended with predictable formalities, and students streamed out in clusters. Jackson walked alone toward his first classroom, Combat Ethics, reviewing a simplified academy map on his wristband. The corridors wound upward through translucent floors that revealed training arenas below, creatures sparring, telekinetic fields clashing, students leaping improbable distances. Jackson absorbed everything with a quiet, disciplined attention. He reached the classroom door and scanned his badge. Inside, the room filled with semicircular seating around an open combat demonstration space. He chose a seat near the back. The instructor from earlier reappeared, glaring as though annoyed the human had survived the walk between classes. "Today," the Grelian said, pacing with heavy, deliberate steps, "we examine predator-prey dynamics as applied across multi-species conflict. Some of you have witnessed apex species encounters firsthand. Others have only heard tales." Students straightened. Apex species discussions always drew attention. A hologram flickered to life, displaying a six-limbed creature with jagged bone armor, mandibles that interlocked like a vice, and eyes built for low-light hunting. Even the hologram radiated menace. "The Vornash," the instructor announced. "One of the deadliest terrestrial predators known. Classified as a level 9 threat entity. Fast, silent, untamable. Even veteran mercenary units avoid direct engagement." A nervous ripple moved through the classroom. Several cadets leaned away from the projection, though it was nothing more than light and memory. Jackson sat very still. A student raised a claw. "Instructor, is it true a mature Vornash can track prey across continents?" "Longer," the Grelian replied. Do not fool yourselves, if this creature marks you, your death is almost guaranteed. Jackson's gaze stayed on the hologram, but his mind drifted, not to fear but to memory. A clearing at dusk. A wounded creature. Blood not his own soaking into the soil. A low growl that should have ended him. And a decision that hadn't made sense even to him at the time. Before the memory could fully surface, a deep thud echoed through the hallway outside. It was faint at first, almost easy to dismiss. But then came another, heavier, closer, unmistakably rhythmic. The kind of sound something enormous made when it walked without caring who heard. Students froze. One of the Telari whispered, Is that in the hall? The instructor stiffened, turning toward the door. Remain seated. The next impact rattled the threshold. Dust drifted from the ceiling vents. A few cadets stood instinctively, their survival instincts overriding the instructor's command. What is that? Someone whispered. And no, another stammered, eyes wide, it can't be. The door handle twitched, bending inward as though pressed by something exceptionally strong. Jackson exhaled slowly. The room buzzed with panic. Alien students braced behind desks or reached for personal defense fields. The instructor's voice cracked as he barked, Stay back. The handle bent further, metal squealing under pressure. Every gaze snapped to Jackson, who sat with an unsettling calmness, hands folded, posture steady. He wasn't afraid. He wasn't surprised. If anything, he looked resigned. The thudding stopped. Silence choked the room. Then, one final thunderous impact against the door reverberated through every ribcage, shaking the walls and leaving the entire class suspended between fear and disbelief. Jackson stood. The room recoiled from him as though he were the danger. He stepped toward the trembling door, expression unreadable, and paused just long enough for the entire class to hold their breath. Guess orientation's over, he muttered. The door groaned. The door blew inward with a metallic scream, shards of reinforced alloy skittering across the floor. Students leapt from their seats, scrambling backward in a frenzy of instinctive self-preservation. Some activated personal shields that shimmered weakly, others crouched behind desks with trembling limbs. The instructor didn't bother with dignity. He staggered behind the podium as if it could protect him from what stood silhouetted in the doorway. Vornash. Not a hologram, not a cautionary illustration. A living, breathing titan of muscle and armor. Its 6 limbs moved with predatory fluidity, each step a heavy, deliberate thud that reverberated through the room. Its hide was a mosaic of layered bone plates, scarred from battles that could only be guessed at. Twin pairs of eyes gleamed like molten amber, tracking the room's every movement. Mandibles flexed, tasting the electric tension saturating the air. The creature was death incarnate, and every cadet knew it. Except Jackson. The beast's attention snapped to him the instant it crossed the threshold. Students shrieked as the Vornash surged forward, its frame brushing against desks and tearing gouges into the flooring. The instructor fumbled for an emergency beacon, but the device slipped from his shaking hand and clattered uselessly to the ground. The Vornash stopped in front of Jackson. Not inches away, not looming with hunger, but lowering its massive head until it aligned with his chest like a monstrous hound awaiting instruction. The class stared, jaws slack, voices caught in their throats. Jackson rested his hand on the creature's armored skull. Easy crawl. You're causing a scene. A stunned whimper escaped a student near the door. Crawl, hearing the sound, released a low rumble that made half the room collapse into their seats. Everyone relax, Jackson said, his tone calm but firm. If he wanted you dead, we wouldn't be having this conversation. The reassurance did nothing for anyone except Crawl, who nudged Jackson's shoulder with surprising delicacy before settling on his haunches. The floor groaned under the beast's weight. He curled his tail around himself, armored plates clicking softly in what looked disturbingly similar to contentment. Security thundered down the hall in synchronized formation, halting abruptly at the sight inside the classroom. Their leader, a Ralthus exosoldier with segmented limbs, raised his pulse rifle with trembling uncertainty. Identify yourself. Is the creature under your control? Jackson lifted both hands calmly. He's with me. The officer's voice cracked. You brought a Vornash into a school? He followed me, Jackson replied. Not exactly my choice. The instructor, regaining a fraction of composure, sputtered in outrage. Humans cannot tame Vornash. No species can. Jackson met his gaze with a flat, disarming patience. I never said anything about taming. Crawl's breathing filled the room like the hiss of a dormant volcano. Students watched with horrified fascination, too terrified to blink. The officer edged closer, voice tight. Explain. Now. Jackson inhaled slowly, eyes drifting to Crawl with a mixture of affection and caution. I met him years ago on a frontier world. He was wounded, dying. Everyone else kept their distance. I didn't. That is not an explanation humans survive, the instructor snapped. Approaching a wounded Vornash is a Darwinian invitation to be torn apart. A faint smile tugged at Jackson's mouth. You're not wrong. He did try. Crawl chuffed, which to the class sounded like the roar of a starship engine. Jackson continued, but he was in pain. Hurt badly. I patched him up, kept him fed, kept him alive. Took a few negotiations before he decided not to bite my arm off. A Telari cadet trembled behind a desk. You bonded with it? More like we came to an understanding. Jackson scratched the underside of Crawl's jaw, where the armor thinned into resilient hide. The giant beast leaned into the touch with unmistakable loyalty. He imprinted. Or imprinted enough that he thinks he needs to watch my back. The officer stared in disbelief. That is not possible. The Vornash recognized no authority. Then maybe I'm an exception. The instructor slammed a fist on the podium, voice cracking. This is a violation of every safety protocol in the academy. Remove the animal at once. Crawl's head snapped toward him, lips peeling back from serrated fangs. The instructor fell backward, scrambling away like prey cornered by a shadow. Crawl, Jackson murmured. Instant obedience. The beast quieted, huffing but lowering its head. The security team hesitated. Containing a Vornash was suicide, provoking one was worse. The officer lowered his weapon by a fraction. Does it follow your instructions? To a point, Jackson admitted. He listens if I'm clear. Then tell it to leave the campus. Jackson shook his head. He doesn't leave me. Oh stars, a student whispered, horrified. He's bonded. It's bonded. We're dead. No one's dying, Jackson said. But he can't go back outside. The air traffic alone will make him nervous. And you definitely don't want a nervous Vornash. Crawl emitted a throaty rumble that made desks vibrate. The security officer turned a shade paler. Then what do you propose, human? Jackson exhaled, eyes sweeping across terrified cadets and shaking staff. Give me 10 minutes to calm him. After that, I'll move him somewhere secure. You expect us to trust. A sudden crash echoed from the hall, the heavy thump of another patrol approaching too fast. Crawl stiffened instantly, body coiling with predatory tension. The creature's eyes narrowed, and the air shifted as if charged with static. Jackson felt the change like a cold blade. No sudden movements, he warned urgently. The approaching footsteps grew louder. Security from outside the room turned sharply toward the sound, raising their weapons. Crawl rose slowly, hackles lifting, muscles tensing with a readiness that could end every living thing in the classroom if triggered. Jackson stepped in front of him, voice low but commanding. Crawl. Stay. The beast's breath came in heavy bursts, but he obeyed, barely. The officer looked between Jackson and the doorway, torn between fear and protocol. If that creature attacks, we won't be able to stop it. That's why it won't attack, Jackson said. As long as everyone keeps their heads. The rumbling footsteps halted just outside the door. Silence pressed in, suffocating and absolute. Crawl stared at the entrance, waiting. Jackson extended a hand toward the beast, steady and unflinching. I'm right here, he murmured. Focus on me. Crawl's gaze flicked toward him, but the tension didn't fade. And then from the hall came a voice, sharp, panicked, and far too loud. Is it true? There's a Vornash loose? Crawl's roar shook the building. Crawl's roar tore through the classroom like a physical force, cracking display panels and shattering the last strands of composure among the students. The air trembled with the raw, primal vibration, a sound that sent every species present scrambling for whatever cover existed. Jackson didn't flinch. His hand remained between the beast and the doorway, his voice cutting sharply through the chaos. Eyes on me, Crawl. Not the hall. The Vornash's massive head swung toward him, breath heaving in hot gusts. Its armor plates scraped as its muscles coiled and uncoiled in desperate readiness. Jackson stepped closer, placing his palm firmly against Crawl's snout. The creature shuddered, claws gouging deeper lines into the floor, but it stayed rooted. Security stood paralyzed, their weapons raised yet useless, each waiting for the other to make a decision none of them wanted to be responsible for. The instructor crouched behind his ruined podium, trembling with a fear that smelled almost chemical to those with stronger senses. The doorframe vibrated again. Another patrol approached at a more cautious pace, aware now of the danger. This time they halted before crossing the threshold. Their leader eased into view with her hands held open, her tone measured. "Human, control your animal." "He's not an animal," Jackson replied. "He's responding to a perceived threat. Lower the volume out there and he'll settle." She glanced at the claw marks scoring the floor. Define settle. Jackson didn't bother. Semantics weren't going to help anyone. Crawl shifted, his attention drifting back toward the hall. Jackson pressed on the creature's jawline with a short, practiced tap. Something subtle, a gesture born from their shared past. Crawl's rumbling softened by a hair, the lethal posture slackening just enough to keep disaster at bay. "This won't hold forever," Jackson said. "He needs space. You might not like it, but you need to let us out." "Out?" the officer repeated. "You want to move that thing through the academy? That's a death sentence for everyone." "It's more dangerous keeping him in here," Jackson said, lowering his voice so the tension didn't spike again. "He feels cornered. Terrified predators are infinitely worse than calm ones." The instructor finally found his voice, though it emerged as a strained yelp. "You cannot negotiate with that creature." Jackson's jaw tightened. "I'm not negotiating. I'm informing. If you want to keep everyone alive, you'll do exactly what I say." The officer hesitated, torn between duty and survival instinct. She flicked her gaze over the terrified cadets. "Fine. We'll make a corridor. But you're walking first." "Of course," Jackson said. "He follows me." The officer barked orders into her comm moments later. Hallway motion subsided. Students peered between their fingers, unable to believe any of this was real. The academy was meant to be the pinnacle of interspecies discipline, not the stage for a human leading a living nightmare on a leash made of trust and instinct. Before they could move, the instructor cleared his throat, voice wavering with frantic indignation. "This is unacceptable. You will undergo a full combat evaluation before we permit you to continue your studies." Jackson blinked. "Now." "Immediately," the instructor snapped, then adjusted his tone only slightly when Crawl's mandibles clacked in warning. "A modified trial. You will demonstrate your combat competency without the oi accompaniment of your beast." Crawl's eyes narrowed sharply, and Jackson laid a calming hand on his flank. "Why?" he asked, already knowing the answer. "Because," the instructor hissed, "we must determine whether your presence poses a threat independent of your monster. We cannot allow a fragile, unvetted human to rely on a pet to survive." The word fragile hung in the air like a dare. A few cadets dared to look at Jackson. For the first time since his arrival, something flickered behind his controlled expression. An ember of irritation, maybe pride, maybe something older. He nodded once. "Fine. Let's get it over with." Minutes later, they had relocated to the nearest training ring while Crawl paced restlessly outside the transparent barrier that separated him from the arena. His claws clicked against the floor in a rhythm that betrayed his frustration. Every step Jackson took forward drew a low, unsettled growl from the beast. Inside the ring, Jackson stood opposite his opponent, an Argoth cadet nearly a head taller, with 4 arms, thick exoskeletal ridges, and a reputation for dismantling sparring partners twice his size. His mandibles clicked in amusement at the sight of the human. "You are the one they fear?" the Argoth asked. "Without your monster, you are nothing." "Maybe," Jackson said, rolling his shoulders. "Let's find out." The instructor activated the barrier, trapping them in a gleaming circle of blue light. Students lined the perimeter, their fears slowly shifting into a different kind of tension, the anticipation of spectacle. The Argoth didn't wait for a cue. He lunged, all 4 arms swinging with the brutal confidence of someone who had never known a fair fight. Jackson moved the instant he saw the foot placement, slipping under the first strike, angling his body just enough to let the second graze past him. The third arm jabbed toward his ribs. Jackson caught it, twisted, and used the Argoth's momentum to wrench the limb sideways. A sickening crack echoed. The Argoth howled, stumbling backward. He tried to regain footing, but Jackson was already inside his guard. A sharp elbow to the throat, a pivot, a step through, precision not power. The Argoth dropped to one knee, choking. Gasps rippled around the ring. The instructor stared in disbelief. Jackson stepped away. "It's over." The Argoth lunged again, enraged. Jackson sidestepped and swept his legs with a single, fluid motion. The cadet hit the ground so hard the barrier flickered. Crawl's roar answered from outside, rattling the entire arena. He pounded the barrier with his claws, desperate to intervene, but Jackson lifted a hand to the beast even as he remained facing his opponent. "Stay," he commanded. Miraculously, impossibly, Crawl did. The instructor deactivated the barrier, shaking from more than adrenaline. Human, what are you? How did you defeat an Argoth unarmed? Jackson knelt and checked the cadet's injuries, his voice controlled. Humans aren't stronger. Or faster. Or thicker-skinned. We're adaptable. We learn. We adjust. And I've fought things much worse than him. He stood and turned toward Krall, who had gone silent but watched with an intensity that bordered on worship. The officer approached cautiously. You've proven you're not defenseless. But we still can't have that creature roaming freely. Jackson looked at her, then at the instructor, then at the gathering of cadets whose understanding of humans had just shifted irrevocably. You can try to contain him, Jackson said quietly. But if you do, the Academy won't survive the attempt. No one argued. Before another word could be spoken, the lights overhead flickered. The Academy's alarm system howled through the halls, a much deeper, more urgent tone than anything used for drills. A mechanical voice filled the arena. Intruder alert. Unauthorized combat unit detected inside level 3. All personnel evacuate immediately. Krall's eyes snapped toward the sound. Jackson felt a chill cut down his spine. He knew that tone. And he knew exactly who was coming. The alarm's resonance throbbed through the arena floor, a deep, metallic pulse that made Krall lift his head with a sharp, instinctive jerk. His armor plates bristled in a chain reaction that signaled one thing: the threat was real. Jackson felt the shift ripple through the beast's frame, and a dread he hadn't tasted in years settled on his tongue. The instructor stammered something meaningless, drowned out by the academy-wide announcement repeating with mounting urgency. Security teams scrambled across the upper walkways, their shouts overlapping in a frantic tangle. The officer who had been negotiating with Jackson earlier began issuing orders again, though the fear beneath her voice was impossible to hide. Identify the intruder unit, she barked into her comm. Send a visual feed now. A holographic display flickered into life in the center of the arena. Static fuzzed across the image before stabilizing into a view from one of the level 3 corridors. The hallway lights strobed red, illuminating armored figures moving in tight formation. Their plating was matte black, their helmets angular, and each one bore the unmistakable insignia of a fractured crescent. Jackson's gut clenched. Mercenaries, the officer whispered. But inside Academy perimeter? How? The feed panned to show their leader emerging from the rear. Taller, heavier, with armor reinforced across every joint. His helmet retracted, revealing a scarred face Jackson had hoped never to see again. Rex. The same man who had once hunted Krall on the frontier world. The same man whose squad had fired indiscriminately at anything that moved, even civilians. The same man who had sworn vengeance the day Krall tore through his unit and Jackson helped the beast escape. Rax looked older but no less dangerous. His voice carried through the corridor feed like a gravel storm. Sweep the level. The beast is here. I want it alive. The human too. They cost me a squad. I intend to collect interest. The officer spun toward Jackson, horror widening her eyes. You brought this on us? Jackson didn't answer. He was too busy calculating escape routes, choke points, Krall's likely behavior, and the mercenaries' tactical formations. Memories slammed into him. Rax firing at a wounded juvenile Vornash, laughing while it struggled to flee, barking orders to burn nests, destroy dens, take trophies. Jackson remembered the smoke. The smell. The way Krall had looked at him that first night, too tired to fear, too hurt to fight. No, Jackson thought. This ends here. Krall prowled alongside him now, tail sweeping the ground in a slow, lethal arc. The beast's breathing deepened into a resonant growl, not loud but heavy enough to vibrate the air around him. His eyes burned with a cold, focused rage Jackson had seen only once before, the day their bond was forged. We need to evacuate, the officer said, snapping back into command mode. Everyone out. Move. Cadets rushed toward the far exit, stumbling over each other in their haste. Jackson stepped forward. Send them to the upper levels. Mercenaries will push toward central halls first. You sound certain, she said. I know how Rax operates. And what about you, she asked. What are you doing? Jackson looked down at Krall. The answer was already walking beside him, war-ready and silent. I'm stopping him. The officer moved to block him but froze when Krall's low growl rattled her chest cavity. She stepped aside with trembling reluctance. If you die, the Academy will blame me. Then I won't. He strode into the hall with Krall at his flank, moving with an unhurried confidence that contrasted sharply with the panicked cadets fleeing in the opposite direction. The alarms screeched overhead, punctuating the thunder of distant explosions as the mercenaries breached deeper into level 3. Crawl sniffed the air. His posture stiffened and Jackson knew he sensed them. They turned a corner just as a squad of mercenaries approached from the opposite end. The moment their visors locked onto the Vornash, they opened fire. Energy rounds streaked down the corridor, slamming into walls and shimmering off Crawl's bone armor. The beast roared, but it wasn't the panicked bellow from earlier, it was pure fury. Jackson sprinted toward a side alcove, using it for cover as Crawl launched himself forward. The Vornash hit the first mercenary with enough force to hurl him into his comrades. Armor buckled. Weapons skittered across the floor. Screams erupted. Crawl moved like a living storm, each strike methodical and devastating. Jackson used the chaos to flank the squad, sliding into close quarters where their rifles became unwieldy. A quick twist disarmed one, a sharp elbow shattered another's visor. Jackson struck with economy, no wasted movements, no hesitation. The corridor fell silent except for Crawl's heavy breaths and the crackle of sparking rifles. Jackson knelt beside an unconscious mercenary and retrieved a comm device from his belt. Rax's voice hissed through it. "Report. I want that beast unharmed." Jackson lifted the device. "You always did underestimate him." Pause. Then the cold, amused exhale of a man who recognized an old enemy. "Well, the stray human lives. You shouldn't have come here." "On the contrary," Rax said. "You delivered my quarry into a convenient cage." Jackson crushed the comm under his boot. Crawl nudged him, urging him forward. They moved deeper into the academy, stepping over debris and collapsed ceiling panels. Smoke drifted from a ruptured conduit. Jackson felt the academy's heartbeat in the tension of every wall, every trembling light fixture, every distant explosion. Rax wasn't here for slaughter. He was here to reclaim something he believed belonged to him, the prestige of killing a Vornash and the man who humiliated him. Jackson and Crawl reached a split in the corridor. The left path led toward the cadets' safe zone. The right path led deeper into the central mechanical hub, where Rax was almost certainly headed. Jackson turned right. Crawl followed without hesitation. The farther they went, the quieter the academy grew. The alarms became distant echoes, the smoke thickened with each step. Their footfalls were the only sound in a narrowing stretch of hallway where shadows gathered like silent witnesses. Then from the darkness ahead, a slow clap echoed. Rax stepped into the failing light, his armor scorched, his expression carved into a cruel, satisfied grin. "Reeve," he said. "And the beast. Just like old times." Crawl's growl rolled like thunder. Jackson met Rax's stare and felt the weight of every unfinished moment between them pulling tight. "Let's finish it then." The corridor trembled with a vibration that was almost alive, each footfall from Rax's soldiers sending shocks through the reinforced flooring. Smoke curled in chaotic spirals from ruptured conduits, and sparks leapt from exposed wiring, illuminating the tension on every face. Jackson's jaw was tight, eyes scanning for any advantage, for a choke point, for a weakness he could exploit. Crawl's armor plates clicked softly as he shifted beside him, muscles coiled like steel springs, breathing low and deliberate. The Vornash didn't just move, it calculated, every movement honed from years surviving predators far worse than mercenaries. Rax stepped forward, unhurried, letting the shadows of the hallway mask his armor's full detail. Scarred and lethal, he had spent years hunting apex predators, yet here he was facing one that was not only untouchable by force but tethered to a human, an anomaly he could neither predict nor control. "You've grown bold, Reeve," Rax said, voice gravelly, carrying both admiration and malice. "I hoped you'd stayed fragile." "I've never been fragile," Jackson replied, voice calm but firm. "And you've never understood humans." The first mercenary lunged with energy blades drawn, a blur meant to overwhelm. Crawl reacted before Jackson could even signal, his massive claws snapping through the air with precision. The mercenary's momentum threw him against the wall, and sparks flew where his armor scraped the panels. Jackson seized the moment, rolling under the debris, striking with calculated force at the approaching reinforcements. Every move was a study in efficiency, earthborn reflexes, instinct honed from survival in hostile worlds, combined with the symbiotic coordination he shared with Crawl. Rax's eyes narrowed, realizing brute strength alone would not win this. "You rely too much on the creature," he hissed, drawing a plasma pistol. "Without it, you are nothing." Jackson shook his head, ducking a ricocheting blast. "I've never relied on him. He follows me because I earned his respect. Something you wouldn't understand." They danced through the collapsing corridor, each step measured, the sound of crumbling ceilings and cracking walls underscoring the stakes. Kral intercepted another mercenary, snapping limbs and disabling weapons with terrifying precision, his growls vibrating like war drums. The air was thick with smoke and charged fear, but Jackson remained unervingly focused, calculating angles, anticipating attacks, communicating with subtle gestures, a silent language born of trust and necessity. The fight drew them toward the central hub, where Rax had set explosives around critical support systems. The man wanted not just to kill them but to destroy the academy in his pursuit of vengeance. Jackson's mind raced as he calculated risk, memorized layouts, and analyzed the timing needed to neutralize both the mercenary threat and the explosives. Kral's senses were already ahead, tail flicking, ears rotating, body tense with anticipation. Rax's voice cut through the chaos. "You think you can win against me and my squad? I am the hunter of hunters. And I am the one who tames the untamable," Jackson countered, ducking another blast and kicking a fallen console toward the advancing mercenaries, short-circuiting their weapons. Sparks erupted, illuminating Kral's plated form as he lunged at the remaining squad members. Each strike was deliberate, efficient, and lethal without being mindless, a perfect balance of predator instinct and controlled precision. Rax advanced, ignoring his wounded men. He raised his pistol, aiming at Jackson, but the human didn't flinch. Instead, he rolled beneath a falling support beam, closing the distance between them with breathtaking speed. Kral's massive frame blocked the corridor behind, forcing Rax to pause. The Vornash's low rumble resonated through the structure, warning of imminent violence. "You think that creature scares me?" Rax spat, raising his weapon. "I don't need to scare you," Jackson said. "I need to end this." In one fluid motion, Jackson vaulted, grabbing the edge of a nearby support beam to swing behind Rax. The mercenary fired, but Kral leaped, intercepting the energy pulse in a bone-clad forearm with a deafening clang. Rax's advantage dissolved as Jackson tackled him into a reinforced panel, the two men crashing with a force that rattled the hub. The fight became personal, raw, and brutal. Rax swung, but Jackson used leverage, twisting the man's momentum against him, disarming the plasma pistol, and snapping Rax's arm in a precise, controlled maneuver. The mercenary screamed, fury and pain mingling in a sound that would haunt him forever. Kral roared, shattering the remaining resistance around them, his eyes fixed on the leader who had once threatened his life. Every mercenary not incapacitated fled or fell under the Vornash's overwhelming dominance. Jackson stood, chest heaving, observing the aftermath, body strewn, debris smoking, alarms still blaring. For a moment, the world held its breath. Rax lay on the floor, broken but alive, staring at Jackson with a mixture of disbelief, hatred, and begrudging respect. "You are no human," he rasped. "I am exactly what you said I wasn't," Jackson replied. "Adaptable, resilient, dangerous when underestimated." Kral lowered his head, the tension in his massive frame easing slightly as he exhaled a low, vibrating rumble. Jackson patted the beast's armored neck. "Good boy. That's enough." The Academy's alarm system began to fade, the lights stabilizing, revealing the extent of the destruction. Students emerged cautiously, eyes wide at the sight of a human standing victorious, unarmed, beside the galaxy's deadliest predator. Whispers spread like wildfire, humans were not fragile. Humans were apex in their own way, adaptable, cunning, and terrifyingly capable. The dean arrived, flanked by senior staff, their expressions a mixture of awe and fear. "Reeve," the dean said, voice measured but shaking. "You've changed our perspective of humanity entirely. That was extraordinary." Jackson straightened, shoulders back, gaze unwavering. "Not extraordinary. Necessary. We survive because we adapt. That's what humans do." Kral pressed close to him, a living shield of lethal elegance, and for the first time the Academy truly understood the bond between the two. Not master and pet but partners. Apex predators of different kinds walking the same path. The surviving cadets approached cautiously, eyes hesitant but filled with new respect. How did you do it?" one asked, voice trembling. "Focus. Observation. Trust," Jackson said simply. "Everything else falls into place when you respect the challenge rather than fear it." Rax, still groaning, glared but didn't speak. He understood defeat, and more importantly he understood that humanity, soft, fragile, underestimated humanity, was a force that could not be ignored. Outside, the Academy courtyard was bathed in the twin suns' light, smoke and debris curling in golden warmth. Jackson knelt and stroked Kral's head, feeling the pulse of life in his massive frame. The beast rumbled softly, leaning into him. "Come on, boy," Jackson murmured. "Class starts early tomorrow." And for the first time in the galaxy's long history of underestimating humans, every species watching knew they had misjudged them entirely. Humans weren't fragile. They were the ultimate survivors. They adapted, they endured, they led. And when necessary, they carried monsters into battle as easily as others carried their pride. The Academy would never forget the day a human walked in carrying a beast that hunted worlds, and in doing so, redefined what it meant to be human.